The second graphic novel that I have is for more upper elementary students. It is part of a series, Geronimo Stilton series, whom the author is also Geronimo Stilton. This one is called First to the Last Place on Earth. A unique thing about this book is that it is part of a very, very large series. In fact, this is the 18th book in that series. And so if students are interested in one of these books, there's plenty more of them to read and go on adventures with. And there's also spin-off series from this original Geronimo Stilton book. The narrator is Geronimo Stilton himself, who is editor of the Rodent Gazette. And he works with Professor Von Volt, who is a famous inventor, famous scientist who invented a time machine. And in this book, they are trying to defeat the pirate cats from claiming that they found the South Pole. So it's a very entertaining book, and there's a ton of action in it. But one of the concerns I had when I read it is that it jumps back and forth from future to traveling back into the past, and it might be a little bit difficult for students to follow what is going on the first time they read it. They may have to read it a few times. Another thing that I found a little bit challenging in this book had to do with the pictures. The individual pictures are excellent. There's a lot of color to them, and just like the last graphic novel, very easy to follow in terms of what is coming next, which text box is coming from which character. However, because the main characters are mice, the good guys, and then cats, the bad guys, the mice all kind of tend to look alike. And so when the speech bubbles are coming out of their mouths, sometimes I found it a little bit difficult to remember which character that was and put it all into context. So I knew I would have to read it a few times. And the same thing with the cats. When the cats were talking, sometimes it was a little bit difficult to determine, is that the dad cat that's saying that, or is that the daughter? You really had to study the pictures to be able to figure that out. One way that this book could be used with students would be in learning about character maps. So for this book, I would choose Geronimo Stilton as the character to dive into. You could write a lot about his appearance and his behavior and the reaction that others have to him, because again, he's acting as kind of the narrator of the story, so you get a lot of peeks inside his mind and what he's thinking. And then, so that would be just kind of on the surface character maps, but you could also go a little bit deeper, again, depending on if you've done character development with students before. And going a little bit deeper, students could provide evidence for the traits that they are giving the character. So for Geronimo Stilton, they might say that he is professional, and then they could go back and find evidence in the text and the way he dresses and the way he writes his newspaper articles, the language he uses. For behavior, they might say that he is calm, and again, they could go back and see how Geronimo handles tense situations and remaining calm in those. And then the reaction of others, I think students would definitely say that Geronimo Stilton is a leader, and they could go back and again find evidence of how people look to him for direction and to see what they're going to do next. Another curricular area that this book would serve well would be in a social studies lesson, like a geography lesson. They are traveling to the South Pole, and so there's a couple different ways that a lesson could be looked at. One, students could look at the globe, find where Nebraska is, and describe a route to the South Pole, different landforms or land masses that they would travel through, or bodies of water to get to the South Pole. Or they could just look more deeply at the South Pole, the landforms that are present there, the climate, the weather patterns, and any animal life that is there. So a few different areas that you could look at if you took this book into a science lesson.